Welcome to the Bad Roman Podcast. On this show, we talk with veterans, community leaders, Christians and non-Christians as we explore the entanglement of Christians with the state. The Bad Roman Project was created out of the firm belief that as Christians, we are called to follow Christ, not the state. Here is your host, Craig Harguess.
Hey folks, let's talk gardening. Let's talk gardening and agorism. Let's talk gardening and God. One thing that should be our focus is to become more self-sufficient, less reliant on the state. Today, Corey Ellerbe comes on the show to talk about his experience with gardening as a Christian agorist and to tell us about his YouTube channel, Old 37 Homestead.
Let's go. Yeah. Left, right, left, right, left. We got our marching orders, man. Left, right. We'd rather serve God than serve Caesar, you feel me? Right. I'm just trying to live what he said. I'm just trying to...
Corey, how are you doing?
Doing all right. How about you?
Doing really well. It's pretty warm outside, but it's getting that. I don't know what it's like. You're in Florida, right?
Yeah, I'm in Central Florida, and it's right now it's in like high 90s.
Yeah, I don't know what your humidity level like is in Florida, but when I grew up in West Texas, very dry heat. You could be 105 degrees and you didn't notice it really. You know, it's still hot. Don't get me wrong. Then I moved to Fort Worth and we moved to Northwest Arkansas. I couldn't believe the humidity there. Mm-hmm. Then I moved to Memphis. And I was like, man, there's no humidity like this in Memphis. I don't know if it's because we're sitting right on the Mississippi River or not. But I went back to visit my mom after moving here, and we're sitting on her back porch visiting, and it was humid. But she goes, "Man, it's so humid today." I was like, "This is not humid. Mm-hmm. This is not humid. You walk out the front door in Memphis, and it's going to take your breath away." And I don't know if it's similar to like that in Florida or not.
Yeah, it is. You walk outside and it feels like you're wearing a wet blanket.
Yeah. Well, before we get too far along, what I like to do, especially with new guests on the show, is to get some background from them. Just tell me and the listeners whatever you want us to know about you. Then we'll get into the topic of gardening.
To be honest, I try to stay as private as possible.
That's fair.
I live in Central Florida. Like I said, I'm like in the middle of the state. So middle as far as north and south, and middle as far as east and west goes. Grown up here my whole life, and I got into gardening. I kind of, when I was a teenager, started to have a little bit of an interest, but I never had, like my parents at the time when I was still living at home and I was like finishing up high school, going into college, they lived in a neighborhood with an HOA, and they don't have a big yard, so there's not really anywhere to grow anything. So I didn't really put it into practice until I got married. And the house that my wife was living in, we have an acre of land. And so after we got married, probably within a year or so, I just gave it a shot, my first try. And ever since then, it's been like this long journey of figuring out basically how to do it, and figuring out the way that I like to do it best, and what works for us. And, I'm still learning. I've been doing it for several years now, but I'm still learning a lot. I'm no expert by any means, but I do have several years of experience.
Well, in my mind, you're an expert, because I am not. This is something that I'm just now trying my hand at, and it's kind of interesting how this kind of came about, because everybody knows that listens to the show. I make my own homemade salsa and do farmers markets and sell it, online and as well. And people would always encourage me to kind of maybe start growing my own peppers, growing my own vegetables for it. And I never really thought of it, never done any gardening. My mom has my whole life. I know my mom still gardens, she loves it. She loves getting out there and getting her hands dirty and stuff. And so I've been around it, but I've never even tried it. And the more I talked to some guys at work, they were talking about growing some peppers and tomatoes and stuff. And I just got to asking questions, and I'm like where you were talking about. I live in an HOA right now. There's not much. My backyard's pretty small. Got a decent sized front yard, but what I started with was in 5-gallon buckets, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But, my producer, she said you ought to find somebody, because I was talking to her about it a little bit. And she said you ought to find somebody to come on the show to talk about this, and then you and I were both on a Discord channel together, and it just it was kind of cool to me how it kind of happened like that. We were talking about it, and now here we are. But I just actually went out and checked on my pepper plants. I got a couple of cayenne pepper plants and a Carolina Reaper plant growing, and they're getting pretty tall. I mean, especially the cayenne pepper plant. And I was told too, for like the first 2 weeks after planting them, I didn't plant them as seeds. I planted them; they were already, growing.
Mm-hmm.
They told me they started, growing or blooming like some flowers, little white flowers. And the guy at work told me, he said, pick them off. And I was like, why? And he said, because it's going to encourage it to grow out and produce more peppers that way. So like that, and I read up on it for like the first 2 weeks. It recommends picking those flowers off at least for the first 2 weeks. So that none of that's new to you. That's news to you, obviously. That's not news to you, obviously. So you understand that.
No. I don't really grow. I'm not a huge fan of spicy food, so I don't grow peppers. But it's similar kind of thing with peppers are in the nightshade family, so it's similar kind of thing with tomatoes, eggplant. They're all in the nightshade family. You can, when they first start producing flowers, you can pull those off so that it focuses more energy on growing more leaves, strengthening its root structure, that sort of thing. But yeah, it depends on what you want to do.
Well, let me ask you this, and I promise we'll get into this a little bit more, but something I've been curious about, like the cayenne pepper plant, I'm having trouble with bugs, but it doesn't seem to be a problem. Where the Carolina Reaper plant, like the bugs aren't even touching it.
Mm-hmm.
The cayenne pepper is still growing. The plant's still growing very tall. So I don't know, is there something I should do as far as bugs, or is it? Because somebody also told me too that pepper plants are pretty resilient, and he lives in Florida as well, and he said his pepper plants, he never really has a problem, even if the bugs do chew on the leaves a little bit. And I don't know if that's something you've heard or dealt with before.
Yeah, it just depends on the type. It depends on the amount of stress they're putting on the plant. Because I mean, bugs are naturally, supposed to be eating these types of plants. It's a part of the natural cycle of things. So if it's, if I have a plant and bugs are getting on it and they are causing a little bit of damage, but the plant's, constantly getting bigger and it seems happy and it's producing, that sort of thing, then I really don't worry about it, because it apparently it can handle the stress from the bugs and keep going. But if you have a case where it's getting like overwhelmed, then you may have to do something about the bugs, and there are various ways you can handle it. I know that a lot of times the spicier the pepper, the less bug issues you're going to have, just because it's, I don't know if the leaves are spicy to them or what, but so it doesn't surprise me that they're not touching your reapers, because
it's a hot pepper.
It's very, very hot. Yeah. So, but I wouldn't, unless you just don't want to have any bugs on there, I wouldn't worry about it. If the plants are still thriving, then you really don't have anything to worry about. And like, we may get into this a little bit more, but one thing is like, and I would always tell people, one of the ways of, modern agriculture and commercial agriculture that's kind of backwards in the way that they do it is that, their focus is on as much yield as they can get. So they want absolutely as perfect conditions as they can get. And so that means like, we got to get rid of as many bugs as possible. The problem with that is when you get rid of the pests, like the pest bugs, then you're not leaving anything for the predator bugs to come in. So people have gardens and they'll just consistently spray it to kill all the pests, the aphids and the mealybugs and the vine borers and all sorts of things that will eat it. But then they wonder why they don't ever see ladybugs and praying mantises and assassin bugs and all those kind of things. And it's because you're taking away their food source. So if they're going to be there, they're going to starve. Well, they're not going to stay there and starve. They're going to go somewhere else and try to find food. So they'll just leave. So, I always try to tell people, if your plants are stressed to the max and they're dying because of the bugs, then yeah, you're going to have to step in. But if they're still thriving, then I wouldn't touch it, and it would encourage their natural predators to come in and take care of it for you.
Yeah, that's like I said, this is so new to me, and I'm not one to really. I don't necessarily want to kill the bugs. I don't necessarily. And I don't want to put any kind of chemical on the plant either. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I want it to do what it's supposed to do without any kind, you know what I'm saying? Without adding something like that to it. You know, but I don't know. But it's I'll send you a picture of the plants when we get done here, and you can look at them and tell me what you think. But I think it's okay. Like I said, that sucker's still getting tall, and it's. I planted them on my birthday, May 2nd, and I mean, so just over a month now. Those suckers, they're growing quite well. Our mutual friend Patrick was growing me some reapers. He lives in California, and he started them back when it was cold, but he was growing them inside. And he'd still sometimes he'll send me a picture of how they're doing, but I don't. It seems like his were growing a lot slower than my reaper plant. Like I said, it's going it's getting pretty big itself. The leaves on it are huge.
Yeah, hot pepper is like the heat. So if his conditions are a little bit more mild than yours, you may have more luck with the hot peppers because they like the high heat.
Yeah, they're getting a lot of direct sunlight. Where I've got them sitting on the side of the house. I mean, the sun's beating down on them pretty much all day long anyway. But what somebody also said too, as far as watering them, when he does reapers or cayenne peppers or any peppers in general, he said especially the reapers, they like to drink a lot of water.
Yeah,
and he said about 2 or 3 times a week he'll give it a good pour water and. That's what I just went out and watered them. I don't know. Is it best to water them in the morning, or does it matter if you water them in the afternoon? Or
I mean, it really doesn't matter. This is something I know we'll get into more like further in the episode because this is one of my pet peeves with gardening. It's best to do it in the morning or evening to allow for more absorption into the soil. If you do it in the afternoon, more of it will evaporate than gets into the soil. However, it won't hurt anything.
Yeah.
So like if you watered it in the afternoon, that's not a bad thing. So if you were busy in the morning or you're going to be gone and except for this one time in the afternoon, but it's like, I got to water the plants and I've only got this one time to do it, just happens to be in the afternoon, then go ahead and water.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah, I'll check on them every 2 or 3 days just to make sure, and I'll just make sure the dirt's still, if it's dry, then it's getting some water. I'm not going to leave it dry. But we had a pretty good storm come through here last night. So, and then they got some more water today, so they should be good for a couple of days. Hey folks, do you like salsa? I love salsa. I have come up with a fire recipe, and we have been shipping this homemade salsa all across the country. If you like salsa and want a cool way to support the project and spread the message of no king but Christ, then holler at us. You can reach us at badromansalsa@gmail.com or visit the official Bad Roman Salsa Facebook page and message us there. Thank y'all so much for your continued support. Now let's get back to the show. All right, let's. I've got a few notes jotted down here, and I'm really kind of want to pick your brain about some stuff. Keep picking your brain about some more stuff, but you kind of touched on a little bit earlier about how you got interested in. You started as a teenager, you said, then you kind of once you got married, you got more into it. But what was the thing? Was it just the space that you didn't have? That once you finally had the space, is that what encouraged you to start doing it, or was there something else going on?
Yeah, it was mostly that. I mean, when I was still finishing up high school and getting into college and stuff, I remember one time I was at Lowe's here nearby, and I just walked into the gardening section. I don't even know why I was there, but I walked in and I saw like the seed packets, and I was like, oh, this would be so cool to, grow some tomatoes or something. But we just didn't really have anywhere. Like my parents' backyard is pretty shaded, and being in an HOA, depending on how picky they are, they don't want to see you growing anything like that. Now, knowing what I know now, I could have made it work and it would have looked nice and all that. So no one would have complained, and it would have, we would have gotten tomatoes probably, but, it was a kind of a space thing. And then, when I got out and I had land, at first I built like a raised bed, and which is like kind of the most common thing now is to build raised beds. And, I planted some cucumbers and some okra, and I can't even remember what else, collard greens, I think. And at the time, I didn't care about like organic gardening or anything like that. So I was, just doing it the standard way, getting the blue Miracle Grow and putting it on once a week. And, I had, I grew quite a bit of stuff. And then, so that kind of was like, okay, I can do this. Like, this is something that, I enjoyed. And we got several jars of pickles out of all the cucumbers that we made. And so I started playing around from there. And then I started to notice, hey, how come things aren't working the way that I want them to? Why is it, I grew cucumbers this one time and now I can't get them to grow. The vines die. And how come all the plants look so sad in the afternoon here? And why is it that, just why isn't this working? Why did that work then? What, all this other stuff. And that got me going down the hole of learning how to garden regionally. And gardening here in Florida is way different than anywhere else. Apart from like a few places, there pretty much every bit of the soil here in Florida is just sand. And like at my house, it's not like white beach sand, but it's like a gray. It's just sand. Like if it's dry and you drive down, I have a unpaved driveway. If you drive down my driveway and it's been dry, you'll just see this cloud of dust coming behind you because it's just pure sand. And a lot of the things, if you just walk into your local hardware store and just start buying seed packets, it's not going to work because those are meant for different places. Like we have people that'll the snowbirds will come down in the wintertime here and I'm from wherever, New Jersey, wherever, man, we can grow tomatoes like crazy. And it's like, yeah, but different climate, different soil, your seasons are different. Like Florida, it's pretty much like we started summer back in April. So it's been
Yes.
in the 80s and 90s since back in April. So, in Florida, we're already getting hot. And then you turn on the news or you have family that live up north and they're still dealing with a blizzard. And so, yeah, so everything is kind of backwards here because of the climate, because we're considered subtropical. So we do get some cold weather in the wintertime, but it only lasts for a couple of months. And then we get right back to the more tropical climates. And so I had to learn, and I'm still learning to deal with that. And it actually was, I had been gardening and doing some stuff. And then it was in 2020 when all of that madness went down that I decided to get like very serious about it, because I was looking at the panic all around and the, supply chains breaking and all that stuff. And I started to think, maybe I need to start taking this a little bit more seriously. Because it was serious. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen at the beginning of all the C word mess.
Right.
I didn't know. No one, like everyone was literally losing their mind. Yeah. So that's when I really got serious about it. And now here I am.
Yeah. I didn't start growing anything then, but I did start stocking up on meat.
Yeah.
I had a freezer full of meat. I didn't know I was going to need to start stocking up on toilet paper at the time, but
yeah, we did.
It was one of the craziest times of our lives. I think it still seems so strange when you sit and think back on how all that went down.
Yeah.
When I first went to do this, I told you I planted mine in some 5-gallon buckets, drilled some holes in the bottom of the bucket so it could drain. And I didn't know what I was doing. I went to the closest nursery down the road, called them, make sure they had the pepper plants I wanted first of all. And then nothing against dreadlocks, but I started talking to the guy that worked there that had dreadlocks because he seemed to know what he was talking about, and he was helping me find the peppers, and then he helped me pick out the soil to use for it. And
yeah,
it's worked. So I'm just going to stick with that, and I'll just go back with them. So far it's worked. And if it works like this, I'm just going to start growing my own peppers. Now we've got international food market here, close to it, right outside of Memphis, that I'll get a lot of my peppers from, but they don't carry Carolina Reapers. They don't carry cayenne peppers. They got jalapeno, serranos, and habanero, which I also use. But man, the price of peppers went doubled on me this year from last year. I don't know. You probably don't have to grow a whole or buy a whole lot of produce if you're growing your own stuff. But I was shocked where I could go get a little package of habaneros would be $2. Now they're $4 a package. So that really got me started to think about growing my own peppers too. If I can do it cheaper that way, then I'm going to do it. It'll save my customers money as well along the way, because I don't want to sell jars of salsa for $1 million just to make it work, So if I can keep the cost down that way, I'm going to do that as well. Somebody told me too, like whenever the growing season ends, which whenever I guess it might be different for different places, but I was told I could bring the plants inside and then next year I could just put them back outside and they'll grow again. They'll produce again. Is that true?
Depends on the plant. Maybe with peppers, because peppers can work kind of like perennials. If you take care of them right. I had a habanero plant one time and it almost was like a short-lived tree. I think it ended up like we got a cold snap or something and it froze and it killed it. But yeah, peppers can have a little bit longer life than a lot of your other produce. The plants can be pretty hardy. So I would think that, because I don't know, like I said, I don't grow a lot of peppers, but it'd be something that, hey, it's worth a shot. Just see what happens.
Right.
But it wouldn't surprise me with peppers if it did that, because they can live longer than normal, garden plants.
My only concern with that, though, is bringing them inside is I've got cats and they would shred them. I'm sure they would turn them into a toy. I've got to go to work. I can't sit and babysit plants when they're at the house. And they would tear them up, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know. I mean, I have cats too, and I would imagine if they got a hold of one and took a bite out of it, they might decide they don't want to mess with those anymore.
Yeah.
It's like the Trinidad scorpion peppers. They in Trinidad, from what I've heard, they don't even eat them. They just grow them, and then they make some sort of they put it in like a paint or something, and they put it on the hull of their boats.
Oh wow!
So that barnacles won't grow on it because it's so spicy that they won't grow on it.
Huh.
And they use somewhere over in like Near East Asia where they have elephants. I don't know what kind of pepper they'll use to deter the elephants from like coming onto someone's property and just trampling everything, because they'll go over and they'll think it's food and they'll eat it. And I've actually seen the video. He picks it up and eats it, and then when he bites into it, it's so hot he literally is just like spitting it out, and then they get out of there. So I don't know. It might be worth a shot. Your cats may learn pretty quick.
Yeah, I'll probably try it just to see how they react to it. I do know that I got my youngest cat. She's so ornery. When I buy my peppers, I'll buy them in bulk and I'll freeze them so I can use them later. Well, I'd set some out to thaw and I didn't think about it and I didn't cover them up. And I sat down on my couch and I heard something. I looked over my shoulder and she's over there playing with them. I got her away from it. I didn't realize she'd knocked some. There was some on the floor by the refrigerator. She was turning them into toys. I don't think she ever bit into it, because it was a habanero, it would have lit her up.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think she actually bit into it, but she was biting on the stem maybe. But yeah, I guess if they bite into it, they'll learn their lesson. But she's pretty ornery. She's pretty hard headed.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know how they can be sometimes.
All right. So what you were talking about earlier about 2020 a little bit kind of is to me is a good segue to go in and kind of talk about this next, the next part of this conversation. And I wanted to ask you, how do you look at gardening as far as your relationship or lack thereof with the state? And is it a way to subvert the state? Because I shared a post on our Facebook page yesterday, and I kind of go back and forth between whether the state's going to crumble before Jesus returns or if it's just going to crumble when he returns. I go back and forth where I don't see how it can sustain itself much longer the way it's going, but they always find a way to keep going, and it's usually based on violence. You and I both know that. But there was a question when I posted on our page, there was a question. It was a good question. He goes, this is very eye-opening. He said, how do you plan for something like that? How do you plan for the fall of the empire? And I said, my only response, and this is something I was thinking about too, as far as maybe start growing my own stuff like you, is you've got to try to be as self-sufficient as possible so you can feed yourself, help yourself, and your neighbor, as we're instructed to do in the Bible. So do you look at your gardening that way, as far as maybe a way to subvert the state, or just to be ready for something like a collapse or something like that?
Sure. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with Sal the Agorist.
Yes, sir.
Sal Mayweather. That's one of the things that he talks about, is because that's basically the idea behind agorism, is just using the market, and that means white, gray, or black, any kind of market, to subvert the state,
right,
and basically render them obsolete. I think a really good example of that is what happened in the USSR. Towards the end, it probably happened the whole time, but towards the end, you had people that were, because they weren't allowed to watch movies outside of, basically they weren't allowed to consume any sort of media that was outside of the USSR, or like any of the countries that they deemed, you can consume their media. So they had people who were literally buying movies or bootlegging movies from like the United States, the UK, that sort of thing, and they were selling them on the black market, and they were making bank. Now, of course, you run the risk of getting arrested, but basically what they were doing, and this was just one example of all the different things that people would do to get around the state controlling everything, it weakened them so much that it ended up basically causing the fall of the Soviet Union. And there's a lot of people who would disagree and say that, well, they voted in the right kind of people, or certain people got into power and it kind of led to that and stuff. But I disagree with that. I think that there's no way you're going to vote your way in or out of. You're not going to vote your way into freedom, and by the time the people in the state get done with you, you can't vote them out and expect it to fix anything, because like what we've seen here recently with Trump, everybody kind of touted Trump as being, oh, now I've seen people saying that there was going to be a new golden age in the US, because he was going to come in and he was going to, take out all these corrupt people, and Elon Musk was going to come in. They were going to make all these cuts and stop all this wasteful spending. He was going to stop sending money to Ukraine. He was going to, with RFK Jr., they were going to, fix our food supply. It wasn't going to be unhealthy anymore. And other than like a few minor things, they've done literally none of that.
Right.
And now you've got, Kash Patel, who came in saying, if I was the head of the FBI, I would dismantle it. Now he's like full blown, like hunting down every illegal alien you can find, and, coming out and saying, oh, Epstein didn't kill himself. We don't have any evidence that anything bad was going on Epstein Island, all that kind of stuff. And so basically, long story short, if you put your hope in some politician, minus like in DC right now, minus like 2 people.
Yeah.
They're all the same. Whether they're Democrat, Republican, they're all the same. And, I was I won't say I was a hardcore Republican, but I was Republican for, when I was a teenager. But when I got to the age, when I turned 18 and I could vote, the first election that I was able to vote in, I think it was Obama's when he first got elected. And I was looking at Obama and John McCain. I'm like, I don't like either of these guys, like, why do I have to vote for one of these guys? Like, I don't like them. So that's what started me down the road towards libertarianism. And it was, for a while, I'm like, oh, we just need to get more parties on the ballot. We need to start voting for the libertarian candidates more and stuff like that. And then I realized, looking at what they did to people like Ron Paul and Ross Perot and stuff like that, like, they're not going to ever. You could have 99.9% of America vote for the libertarian candidate, and they would swear in either the Republican or the Democrat. They would not. And Ron Paul tried to run as a Republican to get around that, and they just completely made him out to be this insane, oh, this guy's just crazy. You can't listen to him. And so that's when I started to go, you know what? None of this is going to work. And then I got into anarchism, and really it was, I knew about agorism, but I didn't really understand it or get into it until 2020. And then I was like, I think this is going to be the only way that we can, for lack of better words, win this. And yeah, gardening is a big part of that. But I also like what you say now, as being Christians, we also are supposed to love our neighbors.
Right.
We understand that we're created for community. And I was actually thinking about this the other day, after looking at your list that you sent and the discussion topics. A lot of people, when they get into kind of the green anarchism or the anprims and that sort of stuff, they start thinking, well, I'm going to bug out, get a cabin in the mountains, be completely self-sufficient. I'm going to grow all my own food. I'm going to have, I'm going to create all my own energy. I'm going to live off grid. I'm not going to,
Right.
And there's maybe 1% of people can do that. And usually those people are a little bit weird. And I'm weird, but these people are like a whole different level of weird. But it's very difficult to actually go completely off grid like that. If you look at the Amish, a lot of people picture the Amish when they think about somewhat off grid living, because they don't use cars, they don't use electricity, they don't use modern technology, all that sort of stuff. But I've known people who've lived in areas where there are a lot of Amish people, and they still go to the grocery store, they still go to the hardware store,
right?
All that kind of stuff. So they're not fully off grid. They're not making everything themselves. They're not raising all of their own food. I had some family who just moved back down here from, they were living in Kentucky, northern Kentucky, in an area where there was a lot of Amish people. And it was an uncle of mine, he loves to go fishing. And he said it's hard to find good fishing spots there because the Amish people literally cast net and keep all the fish. So that just, they take all the fish out of the lakes and stuff. And I was thinking, I guarantee you, they didn't make their own cast nets. They didn't go find a plant that made really good, cordage and weave it together and then put stones all around the outside to make their own cast net. They probably drove into town or rode into town, however they do it, went to the bait and tackle shop or Walmart or wherever and bought a cast net.
Yeah.
So that's not off grid. You're still depending on something or someone else to provide you with something. And I think it's a big issue with, it's not wrong for us to depend on other people, and so that's why, to me, it's more important to think about building community less than I'm going to go live and be completely self-sufficient. Like, for example, I don't have, if we had to be self-sufficient right now, I don't have any livestock. I don't keep livestock. So if I wanted to get meat or eggs, I have to rely on, I have friends that have livestock. I have friends that have chickens. I have friends that have goats, stuff like that. So I could form, we could work out something, whether bartering or whatever, because I like to eat meat. But if I was to do that all myself, then that's just really, really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard. And, I think people fantasize about that and they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
The settlers that came over when we had the westward expansion and they started moving out west, a lot of them died.
Yeah.
Because the terrain was new. They didn't know how to grow anything. They didn't know how to, the animals would evade them. It would be a different type of weather, so they would get all kinds of diseases. And I mean, when the Puritans first came over on the Mayflower and all that, had they not had the natives that already lived in the area where they, up in the New England area, they would have died that winter because they didn't know what to do. And the natives helped them, thankfully, and they figured it out. So to me, it's better. And I think this is more of a tenet in like Christianity is we need the community. Like God designed us to be in community with other believers, with Him. So yeah, I think that is gardening is definitely a way to subvert the state, but it also I think has to do with, as you were saying, your neighbors and helping your neighbors, helping each other, which I think could be also a way of subverting the state. I don't need to depend on the state. I can go to my neighbor and ask for help, and they can help.
Yeah, I think I agree 100% because I can be an introvert. I like to be home, and stuff like, because I work so much that I'm not home a lot. So I like it when I do get home, but I think it is important, especially as Christians, to be a part of community. Doing these farmers markets that I've been doing with the salsa, I've gotten to meet so many different people and so many different vendors. You'd be surprised at stuff that I've traded salsa for. I love the idea of bartering. That's one of my favorite parts about doing that stuff is getting to trade with people between me and them. Nobody else needs to know about it, and I think it's cool. And you're right. People's like, well, because I eat a lot of eggs. There's like, why don't you go raise some chickens? I said, I don't have time to deal with chickens. I had chickens when I was a kid. I don't want to. But in the area I live, there's a lot of farmers and ranchers. I could put a post on Facebook in this Facebook group that I'm in this town that I live in saying, I need some fresh eggs. Bam, 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 bam. I got people hitting me up all over. I went and bought some the other day from this guy. He raises chickens and stuff. And so I'm just instead of buying eggs at the grocery store, I've been buying them from other people. And sometimes they will trade too. Sometimes I've traded salsa for eggs. To me, that's cool. But I've had people push back on that idea too. Like, this is maybe where I get a little weird, because I think it would be cool if we could just live in a community, trade with one another where we didn't even need currency. There's people, and I know that maybe seem archaic or whatever, but I've had people push back, say, no, but what about, needing certain different things that they want that you need cash for, or some kind of currency for. And I get it, but I think you get to a point where all of that stuff can be provided by somebody without it, and I know that maybe that's where I get a little weird, but it just sounds to me, that just sounds so much more ideal than what we're doing right now. And especially you were talking about the administration a while ago. That's such a circus right now. I think people really need to start paying attention and start taking stuff like this more seriously. Find people in the community that you can trade with or buy from, because if that does happen, if the state does collapse, it's going to be chaos at first. I mean, if we're going to be realistic about it, people are going to freak out.
Yeah.
So you need these relationships with folks to be able to eat so you don't die. So and I think, man, I agree with you 100% on all that.
Yeah, I had a group that I was a part of for a little while, and there's a guy named Stefan Verstappen, and he kind of like, I guess, survivalism, prepping, that sort of thing is kind of his forte, and he's kind of unlike a lot of your preppers, where he says, like, you shouldn't be trying to be 100% self-sufficient. You should be trying to build communities. And, where you have a group of people in your area that you can get to, they can get to you quickly. And then your group is also in connection with other small groups, and you form this web of, the group that I was a part of, there's a website called freedomcells.org.
Yes.
And John Bush and Derek Bros started that, and that was their kind of premise. Is like, now theirs was a little bit more technological, because it was like finding people that you connect with online and stuff. But like the group that I was a part of, we would meet up, and we don't really do a whole bunch anymore, but I'm still in contact with them. But the idea is you have like a small group that is right in your area, and then you have connections with other small groups that are a little bit farther away from you. And in doing that, you have this, like I said, this web of connections. And, Stefan was saying, like, in time, in history, if you study history, the people who survived the best during collapses of empires, natural disasters, anything like that, were the people that had like a tight community. So like you had, monasteries and stuff like that, that they made it. Sure, it got hard for them, because everything would be hard, but they made it because they had their little group that they were tight with. They could connect with other. It's easier to do that now because we have the technology. They didn't have that back then. But so you had all these people who were people who could grow their own, could garden. You had people who could deal with the livestock. You had people who could deal with, maybe they were good at building, so you could build things. You had people, just a myriad of different skills, because not everybody has the same skill set.
Right.
You need to have that group of people who can do different things. I heard I don't know if you're familiar with a guy named Curtis Stone. He's up in Canada. He is a agorist, anarchist type that's up in West Canada. And he was talking one time, I was listening to a podcast he was on. He said that, like, if I had a community, like if you had like a state collapse type thing and people are trying to find places to go, he said, and if I had a community and we only had room for one more person, and one day 2 people came up to our gate, and one person came up and he said, okay, well, why should we let you in our community? And the guy said, well, I don't really know how to do anything, but I've got, a giant sack of gold. Like, okay. And this other guy pulls up at the same time and he said, yeah, I don't have any money. I don't really have anything, but I've got this tractor here. This old tractor. I know how to fix it. I'm, somewhat of a mechanic. I can work with, vehicles and stuff like that. And I know how to grow some food and stuff like that. I've got that experience. He said, I'm going to take that guy over the guy with the gold. Like, 'cause at this point, I don't need that gold.
Right.
Because and to what you're saying with currency, I'm not anti-currency, but it does depend on, do people want this?
Yeah.
I could have gold enough to fill the Atlantic Ocean, but if nobody wants it, it's completely useless.
Right.
But that's a different topic. That's the failures of modern economics
For sure.
at work there. But yeah, no, community is, and I think, we as Christians understand that, and we should understand that. And there's nothing, you can be introverted and also have community. You can be introverted and also
Sure.
love your neighbors,
Sure.
So I don't think that there's no problem with that, but I think as Christians, we understand the importance of community, like they had in the early church, all these little tight communities that cared for each other and cared for the less fortunate in the area who had nowhere to turn to.
Yeah. And I think the modern church has lost their way in that regard too, honestly. I think it's a complete failure on pastors and stuff too. I just, it's so disappointing to me. And, maybe I didn't understand that fully before, but the longer this project's gone, the longer I've studied early church stuff, like that. It's so backwards these days, and it's very frustrating sometimes. What was I going to say? But to the point of the community, and being as self-sufficient as possible, knowing that, and you're absolutely right. Not everybody has the same skill set, and not everybody has a skill. Like, there's people, the circles that you and I tend to run around in, in this social media or whatever. I see a lot of folks doing stuff like this, gardening and building community, and it seems to be kind of the way our minds work when it comes to stuff like this, because we understand the state for what it is, and we understand that we're going to need that support system at some point. I fully believe that. Maybe we won't see it in our lifetime. I don't know, but I'd rather be safe than sorry, And so if and what you were talking about, like building a network, the people, like if I meet people out at these farmers markets, and I encourage people to attend farmers markets, the people that you can meet out there and make connections with folks out there like that is fascinating to me. And just like you said, they know somebody else. If I need something they can't provide, they know somebody that can provide that for me. And I think that's very cool how that all kind of just works out like that. It's very neat for me to watch. It's been one of the coolest parts about all of this for me is just to get to meet different people, sharing with them, especially when they see bad Roman salsa. They want to know what bad Roman means. So it gives me the opportunity to talk to them about no king but Christ. You know, they understand that, but they haven't heard it in their churches, you know, so I get the opportunity to talk to folks about that. So that's also very cool to me. Anyway, that was a little off topic, but I got a couple more questions. The fifth one, how do you look at gardening with your relationship with Christ?
Well, for me, I probably don't look at it that way enough. I know that my love for gardening, and I mean like all things, it's gone from just growing like a few tomatoes to like, I love the idea of agroforestry. Like, I have on probably a quarter of my property, I've planted a whole bunch of fruit trees, and I would love to have this just amazing food forest. You know, it's mostly me working on that. My wife helps me when she can, but she's, you know, I have two kids and we homeschool, so she's teaching them, and she's got, you know, a lot of duties there. And so she can only do so much. And, you know, I don't want to overtax her or anything like that. So it's just the two of us kind of trying to start this and doing it with limited, you know, limited money, limited resources, doing what we can. But like when I first started gardening, I didn't know what you could have said. Oh, do you know about agroforestry? Nope. What is that? What is a food forest? What is, you know, I didn't know. All I pictured was the little backyard garden, which is fine. There's nothing against that. But I feel like all of a sudden I went like hyperdrive into this full blown like agroforestry and food forest systems, permaculture, all that sort of stuff. And I never would have thought. I've always had a love for the outdoors, just nature in general, wildlife, things like that. And I guess looking back on that, it's kind of, you know, I could see that God gave me those interests. You know, that's how He designed my mind to be interested in this as opposed to anything else. And now, all these years later, it's turned into this. And so to me, my love for this, I only really can attribute that to God, because I look at it and I'm like, how did I come to just love this so much? And it has to be this passion, this desire, this interest, and the drive to do it, I think has to come from that, because gardening's tough. Like it's hard to do, especially nowadays. Everywhere now Florida, I was saying, is specifically tricky, but every state and every region has their own ups and downs. You know, the Pacific Northwest, they have, you know, periods of just so much rain that it just floods everything out, and it gets really cold. If you're in the Midwest, I have a brother-in-law who's from Wyoming, and I've gotten to know his family some, and his dad loves, like, he came out the last time they were down here, he wanted to come and see all that I was doing. And I don't really think it's all that impressive, because I feel like I kill more than I grow. But he was just like, wow, everything was wow. Like, man, I wish I could do this. This is just so amazing. And so he talked to me not long ago, and I was like, you know, look for things that you can do where you are. Like, look for climate and region specific things that you can do in like Northwest Wyoming where they are. But it gets so cold there, and it also, I think, tends to be more dry. So, but you can always do something.
Yeah.
Because there have been people who have done something before. So there's a gardener, and you may have noticed that during this episode, I tend to just go off on rabbit trails, and I'll try to rein that in a little bit. But
I do too. It's all good.
There's a specific gardener that I had started following years ago, and his name is David the Good. And a lot of the books that he writes and the material he puts out on his blog and stuff is geared towards the Southeast, specifically Florida, because he's from Florida. He lives in southern Alabama now, and similar climate to Florida. It's a little bit different than where I am because it's a little bit, they get a little bit colder weather, that sort of stuff, but it's still fairly close. But that was where the kind of the shift happened for me on my mindset about, okay, I can't grow, these your average tomato, your average cucumber, your average this or that you would find anywhere at the Home Depot. I have to be a little bit more specific. Okay. So, there's certain plants that do really well here. It's basically like I have to find, like potatoes, for example. Potatoes, I can grow potatoes here, but it's just a little bit more difficult. Whereas there are other root vegetables that are similar to potatoes that I can grow here that literally I plant them in the ground, I do nothing to them, and they are perfectly happy. And so as far as like the gardening goes, and this is this interest to me of like trying to figure all this out and stuff is where I would say like God has definitely given that interest to me, and I think cultivated it throughout my life with always enjoying the outdoors and like the natural sciences and stuff like that. I just have always found it interesting. And you get a little bit of that mixed in with when you get into like agroforestry and stuff, you get a little bit of that nature science stuff mixed in with the gardening. And then as far as like sustainability, you're planting some of these, a lot of in food forestry and agroforestry, things like that, you're planting a lot more perennial plants. So you've got a food source here that you can come back to, your family can come back to year after year after year, and you're not having to worry about, okay, this is only going to live for like 2 months and then it's going to die because the bugs are going to get to it, or it's going to freeze, or it's going to get too hot. And, hopefully I can get enough of it before that happens. There's for example, there is a type of pea. Like when people think peas, a lot of times people think like green peas, black-eyed peas. If you're in the South, you think black-eyed peas and stuff like that.
Right.
Which grow well down here, but there is a plant that they grow a lot in the Caribbean. I think they grow it some in Africa. It's called pigeon pea. And I know it's really popular in Puerto Rico. They grow it a lot there. And it will live for 2 to 3 years. So it becomes, it becomes like a small tree. And it will produce a ton of peas. And they taste just like any sort of like southern pea, black-eyed peas, conch peas, any of those kind of things. They have a really good flavor. And so you have a good tasting product. It produces a couple times a year. It produces heavily, and it will live for 2 to 3 years as long as something doesn't kill it. It's just naturally, because it likes this climate, it's going to do well here. So that's something, kind of going back to how it deals with subverting the state. There's an example of like, plants like that can just keep my family fed, require as little work as possible, works really well. But I think it also is getting back to the relationship with Christ and stuff like that. To me, being out in nature and observing the birds and the insects and learning, like I've just recently started keeping bees. I've just recently started vermicomposting, which is keeping worms and then using they call it worm castings. It's just their poop, using that as fertilizer, learning how all these things kind of work synergistically. And kind of what I touched on earlier with, people want to just completely purge their gardens of pests. And I'm always like, man, if you can not do that and allow the ladybugs to come in and the the parasitic wasps to come in and the praying mantises to come in and all these things. You'll never have populations of things like that if you just go in with chemicals and destroy everything, like scorched earth policy. So, seeing how all that was designed to work, and just, to me, the beauty of it all, like, all the birds that visit. And I intentionally plant flowers now to give my bees stuff to pollinate. But then you see it bringing in all these different butterfly species. And it's just like, man, it's so cool to sit there and watch, all this stuff. Just, I'll sit there and watch the bees just come in and out and work and do their thing. And I'm just like, man, this is just so cool.
It is cool. It is cool. I think that's kind of where I'm at with it. And I'm, like I said, I've been doing this for a month and I haven't really done anything. I put some pepper plants in a couple buckets and just throw some water on it every once in a while. So I'm not really doing anything on the level you are, but that's why I don't want to kill the bugs. Maybe I'm a softie. I don't know. But the whole idea of how God's creation works together is pretty fascinating to watch. If you just sit still for a second and watch it, like you were talking about. And I think that's cool that you're keeping bees. I know some vendors at these farmers market I've traded for honey that, they have their own honey and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. I used to work with a guy that did it. He retired, but he keeps his own bees and he brings them. It's so much better than that store-bought stuff too. And they say too, like if you're eating honey, that's from your region, it helps with your allergies and stuff like that, so it is very fascinating how all that stuff kind of just works together. I think sometimes we get so busy in our lives that as Christians too, that we don't just sit down and look at some of this stuff, because it is cool to me. I mean, I can look at my pepper plants and when I'm looking at, it's like, all right, they're going to produce some peppers for me, but it's a life. It's a life.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm looking at it weird or not, but I just think it's cool because to watch what it was when I bought them to what they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to kill the bugs that need to eat. I mean, bugs are hungry too. As long as they're not hurting my plants, then
right.
I'm not worried about it, so, but yeah, I agree with that so much.
When you can learn to work, and believe me, I say all this and I am nowhere near an expert, but when you can learn to work with nature, with the way things that God intended it to be, as best as we can, being sinful, but when you can learn to work with that, it almost makes it more enjoyable, I think, and it makes it, to a degree, I think it makes it easier, because you're not working. A lot of gardening, especially on the commercial level, they're almost working against nature.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go out to this, 25 acre field, and I'm going to plow it all up, and I'm going to plant 25 acres of corn, nothing else. And, when you do that, that's like whatever insects like to eat corn, they see 25 acres of corn and it's like they've hit the honey hole.
Yeah.
They come zooming in. And so now, they're trying, because all they care about is their bottom line. How much corn can I churn out and get the most profit out of? So with the amount of pests that you're going to have in that scenario, it's pretty hard to, let me just go release some ladybugs out there. They'll take care of it. It's probably going to be too much. So you're going to have to go out there and spray it. So you go out there and spray it. But now you've just put this pesticide all over the corn. And, they've done study after study showing that even though people have we promise that this is not going to linger. By the time you eat this, it's completely gone. There's no more pesticide residue, none of that. They've done study after study, especially with more of modern chemicals, that no, there's still residual pesticides in this produce that you're eating. And I don't know, but when I watch people go out and spray and they have to wear like a hazmat suit to go out and spray their fields, I'm kind of not thinking that's safe to eat, but
right.
People think I'm weird. So, and I'm not saying commercial agriculture has its place, but obviously I think that there are ways that they should research to do it better. And so without having to rely on chemicals so much. So, cause like raising worms to use worm castings for fertilizer, I mean, worm castings are one of the best ways to fertilize your plants. It's not going to fertilize your plants the same way as if you go buy a bag of fertilizer. It does have nutrients in it, but what it's doing is it's feeding the microorganisms that live in the soil and the fungi that live in the soil. And the roots of all these plants have a synergistic relationship with those microorganisms. The roots will store and release certain starches and things like that these microorganisms need to survive. And then these microorganisms turn around and they release byproducts that the plant roots need. And so it creates this loop. And using stuff like compost, that's why compost is so good. Using worm casting, stuff like that, you're not only closing a loop where you're not wasting all of this stuff like food scraps. I mean, I don't know that I can't ever remember like the amount of food scraps that go into a landfill and just sit there. Whereas you could turn that into, even if you didn't want to garden and grow your own food, if you just wanted to have a flower bed, you could have a small compost bin or a compost pile, and you would never have to go buy fertilizer. You would just, any food scraps that you have, your banana peels, all that stuff, don't throw them away. Put them in this compost bin, and then when it's done, you just spread that with your flowers, and you would be amazed at how well that they will do. Not because they're necessarily fertilizing the plants, but because they're helping the soil be healthy. When you have healthy soil, you're going to have healthy plants. So all those natural cycles that God designed, like the forest, no one goes out and fertilizes the forest, but it grows all sorts of stuff just with this natural cycle. And it's just, I could talk about it for hours. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, I'm enjoying getting to talk to you about this. I can see on your face and while you're talking about how much you enjoy this. It's pretty cool. So as far as fertilizer, and I don't want to keep you too much longer. We're going a little over an hour now, but I have not put any fertilizer on my soil for these peppers. I don't know if it comes with fertilizer. The guy just he suggested this bag of soil, so that's what I went with, and It's working. Should I put some fertilizer on there or just leave it be?
A lot of your bag potting soil has fertilizer in it.
Okay.
Depending on the fertilizer, it can last anywhere from like 3 to 6 months. When did you plant them in the pots?
May 2nd today. At the time of this recording is June 8th. So it's been a little over a month.
You probably, just keep an eye on them and see if they start to seem like they're, not as thriving as well.
Okay.
But you probably, with the fertilizer that's in that potting soil, they'll probably last at least a few months.
Okay.
And then you can either, if they're in containers, it works better to use granular fertilizer or something like that, because being in a container, you can use liquid fertilizer, but sometimes it will just flush right out, and it won't stay. Whereas if you're doing it in the ground and you use liquid fertilizer, sometimes the ground will hold it a little bit longer than in a container. But you can do both, but you probably be good for at least another couple months, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. I think when I read up on it too, it says that usually after 90 days, you start producing peppers. I think the cayenne peppers come on quicker than the Carolina Reapers going to. So I'll just keep an eye on it. Hey folks, we have set up a very simple way to donate to the Bad Moment Project through spotfund.com. Just go to SpotFund and search No King But Christ. This has become necessary to continue to provide a quality podcast and keep production costs down as well. Just $5 or $10 a month will go a long way in helping us keep this project going and continue spreading the very basic message of No King But Christ. So if you like what we were doing and can find it within your budget, go to spotfund.com and search No King But Christ, and you can set up monthly donations or even donate one time. Any and all donations help more than you know. And as always, any donations above production costs will go directly to charities in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank y'all so much. Now back to the show. Man, this has been a lot of fun. We've talked about doing this, and we finally got a chance to sit down and talk about it, because this is a new thing for me. It's a new chapter in my life, I guess. I'm not anywhere on the level of most gardeners, but it's piqued my interest so much that I wanted to keep doing it. And the way these peppers are growing, I can see myself growing all my peppers for the salsa now, you know. And I think, you know, speaking of that, like I get asked that question quite a bit from customers too about, do I grow my own stuff? I'm not going to do the tomatoes. I don't have time to stew them and peel them and stuff like that. I'll tell people I buy canned tomatoes for them because I can buy it in bulk. But as far as peppers, I'm going to do that. I don't know. Maybe I'll look into maybe try to grow some onions too at some point. I don't know if you can grow an onion inside of a 5-gallon bucket. I don't think my HOA would be happy if I started digging up my yard and putting they haven't said anything about this yet. So I don't know. I don't even know where they're at. I just know they charge me $300 every year.
Yeah, you can grow onions in containers. I've grown onions. I built a raised bed one time with cinder block instead of wood, and I planted onions. I put some soil in the holes in the cinder block and planted onions all around the edge of the bed in the cinder block like that. And, you know, they didn't get very big, but, you know, I had quite a bit of onions, and onions are pretty easy to grow.
Are they? Cool. Yeah, I might give that a shot too. Once I get all my pepper plants, you know, the way I want them, if I did produce them, well, I'll probably try some onions. Well, like I said, this has been a lot of fun, a really fun conversation. I think knowing the audience, I don't know everybody that listens, but I know a lot of people that do, and I know the vast majority of them are gardeners or into stuff like that. So I think they're going to enjoy this conversation as well. But I want people to kind of reach out to you on your YouTube channel as well and check you out there. I watched some of your videos that you sent me that link. But tell us a little bit about Old 37 Homestead, your YouTube channel, and then I'll let you get out of here and get back to your family.
Yeah, it is the name. I named it that because it's the street I live off of, and I kind of called it a homestead. I don't know. Some people, you'd be surprised the amount of gatekeeping that happens in the gardening and homesteading community, but there'd be.
I see it in the anarchist circles. So don't.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. There'd be people that would tell me I'm not a homesteader. I don't really care. You know, I just do my thing. But I never really intended to film anything.
Yeah.
Because I'm not really good at it. It kind of gets in the way. It's why I don't post videos every week, because I have a day job. I don't have the time to do all that. And I just, sometimes I'm like, you know what? I don't want to deal with being filmed. I just want to go out and work.
Right.
But I had some family that was like, you know, you should really post, you know, some videos of your, because like I've watched this channel and that channel. I'd love to see, you know, what you're doing. So I was like, oh, okay, fine. I'll give it a shot. And I've kind of done it off and on because I'll get tired of doing it, or I feel like no one's watching. And then all of a sudden I'll have, like, out of the blue, several people subscribe. And I'm like, oh, maybe people, you know, are more interested than I think they are. And all of my stuff is, I'm literally recording with my cell phone. I don't, you know, go through and mix the audio. I don't go through and edit I don't make it like super professional. And maybe that's to my detriment, but I'm not a techie kind of guy. So it is what it is. Like, this is what you're going to get with me. It's just kind of real life. Show some things that I'm doing and kind of almost taking people along with my journey into this, and successes and failures and frustrations and all that stuff. And I have videos. Sometimes I'll have a topic pop into my head, an idea, and it's nothing that I'm working on, but it's something that I want to talk about. So I'll like post a video of myself just when I'm driving to and from work, and, you know, talk about whatever it is that was on my mind. I have a video where I talk about kind of some of the gatekeeping in the gardening community and how people need to stop it. And because I always tell people, like, if whatever gets you out there and growing something, I don't care how you do it. Like, yeah, I don't really do container gardening. I have some, but I do more in-ground stuff, and I'm organic, and I like to make my own fertilizer, and I like to have a food forest. But if you're like, man, I really want to do this, but I don't really know what else to do other than to get some wood and build a raised bed and get some Miracle-Gro, and it's like, well, that's how I started.
Yeah. So
start there, you know, see if you like it, and don't overwhelm yourself.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of the things I mentioned in one of the videos is don't bite off more than you can chew. because that's a lot of times how people quit gardening. They plant, 20 different species of plants. They can't keep up with it. It all dies. And then they say, oh, I can't grow anything. So, start with, even if it's like, I like to cook and use a lot of herbs. Okay, well, get a little container and put it on your kitchen window and grow some herbs.
Yeah.
And when you see those herbs just growing and it's making your food taste great, because everything grown at home tastes way better than anything you can get at the grocery store.
For sure.
You would be surprised how many people just, they fall in love with it and then they start branching out. So that's basically what my channel is just, taking people along with stuff that I'm doing. It's not, if it blew up and became famous, cool. I'm not really trying to do that. I'm just showing what I'm doing. And I would love to have a plant nursery, and it's a slow process of getting there. I do sell some plants online. I do ship certain things. I can't ship everything, but I will ship certain things. But I just sell stuff on like Facebook Marketplace and that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it.
That's cool, man. I think you're right, especially if people just see if you like it, don't overwhelm yourself. I think that's great advice too, because I'm pretty busy, about 9 months out of the year, 9 to 10 months out of the year with my regular job.
Mm-hmm.
We work a ton of overtime, so I think that's really good advice, because I can, when I get excited about something and I'm on something like this, I'm gonna want to do it, and then but then I'm gonna do too much. I know how my brain works. I get excited about something. I'll overdo it. So
yeah, I've done the same thing.
But yeah, just don't overwhelm yourself and just try it out. It is pretty neat, and I'm looking forward to getting to grow some more. And I'm sure I'm gonna have more questions for you along the way. You've been just in our conversation on that night on that Discord channel helped me out a lot, and this conversation's helped me out a lot. And I'm sure I'm gonna have more questions in the future. So
yeah.
Don't be surprised if you get some messages from me.
You know where to send the messages. I'll help it.
Yeah.
Like I say, I keep repeating it, but I'm no gardening expert. I'm not a, master gardener. I don't have any degrees or anything, but, I can answer the best I can. And, if any of your listeners end up coming over to my YouTube or they have questions, I can try. I'll do the best I can. I'll research it if I have to, or refer them somewhere, depending on their region, because I only have experience growing here in Florida, but I can try to reference people to, oh, this is a good resource for your region.
Yeah.
Check that out.
Speaking of that, I had when I put a picture of my peppers on Facebook one day, and I said, all the expert gardeners, I said, what do y'all think? Does it look okay? And everybody said, your plants look healthy. But then there's one girl, she goes, what zone are you in? I'm like, I don't understand anything you just said. And she sent me a link, and it was something you could type in your zip code, and it tells you, I think I was an 8 point. I can't remember what it was. I don't understand what I was looking at.
It's usually like 8A, 8B, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I would think you're probably.
It was an 8. It was an 8 something.
Yeah. People live and die by these things. And because I'm a 9B, all that is a frost hardiness. So it basically kind of gives you an idea of the amount of cold weather and frost and stuff like that you're going to have. So like, okay, apple trees, for example. Apple trees have to have a certain amount of chill hours, which is temperatures kind of around about in like the 40s. They need to have that. Some of them need like hundreds of chill hours a year, every winter, or they won't produce any fruit. Now, people are working on hybridizing apples to grow in Florida, but it's really hard to grow apples here because we don't get the amount of chill hours that's needed to grow them. But on the flip side of that, I can grow pineapples here. And I mean, it's like just dumb easy to grow pineapples where I am. Now, you may be able to do that, but if like someone like you were to say, hey, I live in this zone and I want to grow pineapples because I love pineapple and the stuff at the grocery store sucks.
Yeah.
I would say, well, keep it in pots. That way, when it gets cold, you can put it inside or put it in a greenhouse, something to keep it warm. And then when it's spring and summer and it warms up, you can put it back outside. But like here, I can put pineapples in the ground and it's fine. because we don't get cold enough to, so, but yeah, I mean, like I said, people get so obsessed with, oh, what zone are you in? What zone? You got to tell me what zone you're in, and the zone is fine, but it's like, there's so much more to this than just what's your zone, or, all these little technical jargon that people come up with,
Yeah. It's funny to me too, and I promise I'm fixing to let you go, but not this weekend, the weekend before, I was set up at a farmer's market, and lady set up next to me. She grows her own. She had a bunch of plants. She got her own stuff, And when I'm talking to people like you or her asking questions, to me, y'all are just some of the most, y'all are the smartest people I know right now, because y'all have all this. The way y'all explain it to me, I almost, and nobody's doing it intentionally, I know, but I almost feel so stupid because I feel like my questions are so basic.
That's where we all started, though. That's where we all started. When I first started this, until I found that David the Good and read his books and stuff. That's why I was saying I was trying to grow this stuff, and it would grow and then just die. And I'm like, why can't I grow this? Like, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. I'm buying the seeds. I'm putting it in the dirt. I'm putting fertilizer. I'm putting water. I'm doing all this stuff, and it just keeps dying. And then I realized, oh, well, this specific plant, these seeds, like a lot of your major seed companies are in places like Missouri, Oregon, Washington, places like that. So if I'm buying a seed for whatever plant it is, and it's coming all the way from the Pacific Northwest, that plant is used to being in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Now, I might be able to grow it here, but it's still, that seed would have been better off to grow there. So I always, and I've gotten bigger into this, like talking about regional gardening, look for, as best as you can, seed companies, plant companies, stuff like that, that are growing stuff in your area. And not only buy products from them, but get information from them. What's working for you? Like, if you're into growing fruit trees, what kind of trees grow well here? What kind of, vegetables do well here? I would like to do this. Have you grown this before? If you have, what worked for you that way? They may say, well, this worked in a container, or, hey, you need to put this, like, I have some banana trees. I have 2 different kinds of bananas, and I have them planted on the south-facing wall of my house, because that's usually the warmest wall on the outside of your house, and especially mine, because I get a lot of sun there. So we do get frost and occasional freezing temperatures where I am. And if you have bananas just out in the open, it'll kill them. I mean, absolutely kill them. They cannot handle any sort of frost and freezing temperatures. But I planted them up against the south-facing wall of my house. So when it gets cold like that, they're getting the heat from all day. The sun is on the south wall of my house, and it's absorbing all that heat. So at night, when the temperatures drop, that residual heat is radiating off the wall. And so it's keeping them from completely, I'll lose some of the leaves and stuff like that, but it's protecting the roots and the core of the plant. And so when it warms back up, they just come right back.
Okay.
I would tell people, like, find regional places, and like talking about farmers markets, that's a great place to learn and a great place to find, regional things. People, I'm growing this and it's working for me here, so it will probably work for you.
Yeah, this has been so much fun, man. But we're almost at an hour and a half now, so I didn't mean to keep you so long, but it's a fascinating conversation, and I appreciate you coming on, because I think it's going to be a cool listen for folks when that even if they are master gardeners, or they might get something out of this, or they might have some advice later on as well. But there's a lot of people. It seems like more and more people are getting more interested in stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good thing. And I think we should encourage it and encourage people to start growing their own food, and just be prepared, be self-sufficient as much as possible, build some community like we talked about throughout the show, and I think this is how we do this. I think this is what we was meant to do. This is how God designed us. It's to help one another.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Bad Roman Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcasts to never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, it really helps people find us. 100% of donations are given to local charities in Memphis, Tennessee. To learn more about the Bad Roman Project and to find show notes, please visit thebadroman.com.